appears to be something that interfaces with humans and has been identified in the various traditional religions. And
identified as what?
Bodhisattvas, angels, demons. Then there appears to be some type of technology that is either, in my opinion, this is the truth serum, in my opinion, either is ours, or if it's not ours, it's amazing.
So Ross Douthat from the New York Times did a hour-long sit-down with Diana Walsh Pasulka recently, and if you haven't had the opportunity to watch it yet, I highly recommend that you do. It's excellent. It's spirited, but not adversarial. Spirited in the best way. I'm becoming a real fan of Ross's interview style and of his show. I actually thought this was great. He applies a pretty significant amount of pressure to the UFO narrative in all the places that where it should be applied. It's the type of conversation that is very open-minded but extremely level-headed, and I think we need a lot more of that right now. So he pushes on Diana a little bit and she pushes back. It's very energized, and there are a few moments that really jump out. I thought we would get into those and talk about each of them. The first one is about this whole notion of what an experiencer is, right? So in the broader UFO discussion, there's generally two types of conversation that are going on at any given time. There's the UFO craft, the nuts and bolts, the machinery, the technology, the actual hard edge of this thing that our fighter pilots see, our military sees, that are spotted all around the world. There's that. And then there's the actual experiencers that encounter the craft, the beings inside the craft. They have contact with these non-human intelligences in one form or another. Ross asks Diana to explain what exactly we're talking about. What is she talking about when she says experiencer? What is an experiencer? What kind of experiences are these people having? Check it out.
All right, so we're going to save the aerospace communications for a little further on in the conversation. I want to talk about the details of UFO experience, right? So when you say you went to a conference, you started talking to people who had these experiences, are we talking about sort of the classic X-Files abduction narratives where people report being taken up into spacecrafts? Are we talking about things that are sort of more sort of intimate and personal? Give me a couple examples of what we talk about when we talk about UFO encounters in the 21st century.
Okay, so the people who were at the conference had UFO encounters. And often what this entails is a person will see something in the sky, aerial phenomena. If it's an intense encounter, they will call themselves an experiencer, or they have an experience of a being, or some kind of telepathic communication with the aerial phenomena itself. And this will shift their world, right? This will change them. And some of the people believe that they're getting special information, or they've had this experience and none of their neighbors have had this experience, so they feel kind of special about it. But the experience is a pattern match to the experiences that I saw from 500 years ago, 200 years ago.
When people report having a telepathic connection, you said they get information from, or they feel like they've gotten information from these kind of experiences. What kind of information do they get? What does that mean when people report this?
So a lot of the people would report the information as something that had to do with the future. So they would have ideas of basically like an apocalypse, a bad scenario for the future. So the people who I talked to at this conference were pretty convinced that we were, going to face some type of a cataclysm. So I talked to them a little bit about, how people have thought that for about 2,000 years. And, so it hasn't actually happened. Yeah. So it hasn't really happened like they thought it would. So when they have these experiences and they get this information, it a lot of times makes them upset because, they're thinking that the end of the world is going to happen.
Are Are a lot of these people who you've talked to having what we think of as sort of the classic abduction story, where they feel like they've been taken to a different place, taken onto a ship, these kind of things? Or is it more sort of this kind of just interpersonal communication with some kind of light or being?
It's both. So the classic image of the alien abduction, you see a farmer generally, right, being abducted into a spaceship. So that's like the meme that we see. We also see a cow, right, going up into the spaceship. These are, they're ascending into a spaceship. If you were to see how souls in purgatory are shown in paintings from the 1400s, the 1500s, you'll also see them ascending into spaces, aerial spaces. So yeah, so are people experiencing journeys into other spaces, spacecraft? Are they seeing things that are, not of our reality? Yes, that's what they're having. They're having those kinds of visions, definitely.
That's such a great setup for everything else that comes next. I mean, we've been so focused on the hardware side of it for a while now that to hear the conversation start to circle back around to actual experiencers is refreshing. These are people who, ostensibly have been on board the craft or have come face to face with some of these beings. We spend a lot of time speculating about what technology might exist, what companies might have access to it. Wouldn't it make sense to at least start identifying people who are abductees, figuring out what you can about their experiences? I don't want to say interrogating, but interviewing these people or debriefing them, just to find if there's any intelligence that could be gathered about what we're dealing with, where it's coming from, what its motivations are, what they're after. I just feel like that's a really great place to start. Older abduction cases, pre-internet. I don't know if there's a collective account of all of these different experiences anywhere. There must be. Surely it must be possible with AI now to sift through all that data and find some common themes and figure out if there's any kind of a there. Very interesting that he asks this question right at the beginning and gets right into it. I'm glad to see the conversations coming back around to individual experiencers and particularly abductions, because this is something that has not been discussed in detail for a long time. And, if you're not familiar with Diana Walsh Pasulka, she is an American professor of religious studies at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. She holds a BA from UC Davis and an MA from the Graduate Theological Union, Berkeley, and a PhD in religious studies from Syracuse University. She's also a practicing Roman Catholic raised in a mixed faith household and a mother of 5 teenagers. Jeez, good Lord. She served as the chair of UNCW's Department of Philosophy and Religion from 2015 to 2019 and has functioned as principal investigator for a federal teaching American history grant. She's best known for exploring the intersection of religion, technology, and beliefs about UFOs or UAPs. She argues that public fascination with extraterrestrial life offers insights into the formation of modern mythologies and spiritual systems. So that's who Diana is. If you're not familiar, she's got a great book called American Cosmic that details a lot of her early work in this field. And this interview expands on a lot of the stuff that's in there. So let's go on to the next moment with Diana and Ross Douthat from the New York Times. Okay, this one is really interesting because Ross makes an excellent point. And he says that all of the pieces for a religion, all the ingredients for a religion are present in ufology, folklore, and culture. Listen to how he phrases this and Diana's response. It's great.
One thing that's been really striking to me is that, there are ways in which UFO experiences look like kind of this raw material of religion that hasn't yet been forged into any kind of fully coherent belief system. So, and I'm curious where, you're writing about this as a religious studies professor and sort of framing it in part as kind of the almost the development of a very American 20th and 21st century form of religion. But it seems to be a form of religion that is completely agnostic and uncertain about what it's actually describing, right? Like people, there's people with every theory under the sun to explain what they're experiencing. So I'm curious, what are the actual beliefs of the UFO community to the extent that you can describe them? And do you think that there's a coherent religious vision, or is it just this kind of raw material where every person has a different interpretation?
I fucking love that question. What a great question. What a great question. It's so on point with a lot of what's going on in the UFO community, and just awesome. I'm so glad he asked that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I'm suggesting, and I say this in my book, American Cosmic, is that this is a new form of religion, actually. Coherence is not going to be a feature of this religion. This is a religious development, and it's decentralized. And the reason it's decentralized, it doesn't have a pope, it doesn't have the one experiencer, although there are UFO religions and, like realism. And they come about through the 1940s to the 1960s. But then what you see when we get the internet.
Just to pause, realism was the cult, right? Remind everyone what realism was or is.
It is a UFO religion that originates with Rael. I can't remember his actual name, but he's a French man. In the 1970s, he has a UFO experience. Yep. And he's abducted, or I don't think he'd call it that because it's a pleasant experience for him.
He claims
he's enlightened.
Yeah. And so he comes back and he spreads the message, and this is now religion. It's called a new religious movement. That's how we would describe it in religious studies. One of them also is the Nation of Islam. Okay, so I can talk about both of those. These are both apocalyptic religions in that they believe that the end is soon. Okay, and that the end will come with the arrival of a spaceship. Okay,
but the spaceships are the good guys.
Yeah, in both of those religions,
in both of those faiths.
Yeah, the spaceships are the good guys. That's correct.
So they're bringing peace. They're bringing peace, enlightenment, and so on. But when we say it's a religion, do we mean that there is a kind of supernatural component, a spiritual? Are people praying to the aliens? Like what makes this different from
traditional religion? Is
it just that is the line just totally blurry? That it's like, they're acting like the spaceships are angels, but they're calling them spaceships? Like,
well, you have, an advanced being here who's, going to bring a wondrous world to these people. So it may not conform to what you consider to be a traditional religion like Catholicism, but Buddhism doesn't conform to Catholicism either. So each of those, Nation of Islam and the Raelism, these are traditional religions. Like they conform to what people in my field would call a religion. Right. Do they pray? Do they have practices? Yeah, they do have practices. They're different. So Nation of Islam has a completely different type of practice than the Raelism. They do
Nation
specify.
of Islam, just to clarify, Nation of Islam basically folds a kind of extraterrestrial narrative into a sort of Islamic style of monotheism, right? So it's sort of effectively integrating ideas about other worlds into an Islamic framework?
Yes, yeah. It does. Yes. Yeah. And it's specifically an American religion. So
okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, but for one thing, isn't Mormonism also like that? I'm not a Mormon, but I'm just curious. Like, I think Mormonism endorses aliens, right? Definitely agree that it seems like there is the raw material of a religion is present in the ufology world. I don't think it means that everyone who's involved in the study of UFOs or non-human intelligence or the world that kind of coalesces around those ideas is necessarily involved in some kind of weird religion. I wouldn't say that, but I would say that it does seem somewhat obvious that there is at least to some degree, the raw materials for religion are there. And I think there are people who have definitely taken advantage of that. The Raelians, that's a great example. There is a documentary about Rael, Rael. I think it's on Netflix. I want to say Netflix. And it's great. It's so good. He claimed to have an experience back in the 1960s or 70s, late 60s or early 70s. And then he went on to start giving talks. And basically the whole premise of like his thing was that the non-humans have advanced genetic technologies that allow them to come here and sort of like fix all of our problems. And they want to do that. They want to come make open contact with humans. But in order to make that happen, they've tasked Rael, of course, this crazy French guy with these wacky, like Ziggy Stardust fucking costume that he wore with shoulder pads. And it's crazy. He has like Weird Al Yankovic hair, but he's completely bald on top. And he's got this like wacky, I don't know. He looks like the roadie for Parliament Funkadelic. But Rael, his job is to raise money, of course, to build the spaceport where the aliens are going to come and land and make contact. And so the religion is built up around people getting involved, spreading this message, building support, raising money, then eventually building this place, which is going to be sort of like a super temple to aliens, but also a landing pad and also a welcome center. And like, that's where the religion ends. And their whole shtick was that they had been given the technology to develop clones, or they had developed the technology to make clones. And this was back in the 1990s, the late 90s, when it was like way too soon. Nobody believed it. They said they cloned a baby, and that she's alive and she's out in the world, but it's a crazy documentary. You've got to watch it. Basically, it's this really complicated, convoluted story that at the end, this guy, Rael, ends up fucking everybody's wife. So go figure. Interestingly, the transhumanist people, the transhumanist movement, are people that think AI, advanced technology, is going to solve all our problems and deliver us from suffering and all of these things, and deliver us to a utopian world. And at the core of that sort of technology focused group, there seems to be the seeds of a new religion forming. So I think that's an interesting parallel. Let's go on to the next moment from this interview, and we'll come back and talk about it.
So those are examples where UFO experience gets basically sort of taken into, or takes a traditional religious shape. There's someone who has an experience, they have a prophetic narrative, right? And there's a set of rituals and beliefs, and people subscribe to it.
That's
but then
correct. That's
go on
something
and
of the past.
go on and talk about the decentralized form.
So it's real quick, just to jump in here, like that is exactly what the Chris Bledsoe story is. If that's not a religious experience, I don't know what is, right? Like, he has contact with these orbs. He experiences missing time. A bunch of people see them. He's visited by these things more than once. Then he's given a vision. He sees a bull and a woman in a white dress floating above the ground. She's like see-through hologram. She tells him this prophecy. She gives him this weird item. And then she says, in sometime in 2026, there's going to be this astronomical alignment, and this new age is going to begin, and it's going to be amazing. And from there, which he wrote about in his book, UFO of God, he goes on to spread the message and talk about this. And his son has the Bledsoe Said So podcast. They talk about it all the time. I personally find Chris Bledsoe's story fascinating. I think it's one of the most interesting stories that's come out in the last few years, of someone that's had a highly charged, very powerful experience that they recall in great detail. For sure, definitely a religious story playing out in this weird new context.
That's the religion of the past. That we're not going to see that anymore. So the internet comes along.
Why not? Wait, why not? Why are we
I'm
not going to see that
tell
anymore?
you.
Okay, tell me. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So the internet comes along, and what it does is it creates a decentralized space. When people now see aerial objects, what do? They take their phones out and they record their experiences and they upload them to social media platforms. And so this gets then folded into different narratives. So we're not going to see a coherent traditional religious framework right now because we're in a different infrastructure. Things aren't going back. But no, we're not going to see this kind of coherent UFO narrative unless it comes from the government itself, which I think is happening.
Wow. I don't know that I agree that, the act of taking out your phone and recording video of a strange thing that you see is some kind of a religious act. I don't know that necessarily, that doesn't make sense to me. Because what else are you supposed to do, right? Like if it were 100 years ago, you would, I don't know, you would draw it or you would, write about it. But you use what you have, right, to record the experience. We do this for everything. So not everything we record with our phones is tied to some kind of religious thing. The prophetic visions, though, yeah, for sure. But it's interesting how the internet blends into this conversation and starts to sort of blur the lines between the folklore and the mythology surrounding the UFO issue and the sightings and the reality, and it becomes sort of this weird gray area. Earlier in the interview, they talk about how in Jacques Vallée's book, Passport to Magonia, he's talking about the historical narrative of all these sort of fairy folk and mythological creatures and beings that sort of take the place of what we would call UFOs or high strangeness encounters today. And then he kind of gets up to the industrial age and stops around 1860, stops talking about what happens after that. He's kind of just looking at that time. It's interesting. In 1947, you have Roswell. We supposedly had 1933, the Magenta Italy crash recovery. So right around the time of World War II, this starts to happen. And then you start to get in the 1950s, experiencers, contactees, abductees. This is at the early part of the Cold War when there is a lot of course, nuclear tension and geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. And the way they talk about it, it kind of sounds like they're saying, and I could totally see this, that a lot of what the UFO narrative gets hijacked by the intelligence community to sort of act as a cover for high-tech weapons development, classified projects that they're working on. So the idea that the intelligence world and the military world fell in love with the UFO concept makes a lot of sense to me. And they leaned into it in a way, publicly saying there's nothing to see, but privately sort of influencing these groups and infiltrating different UFO groups. Let's go on to the next moment, and we'll come back and talk about it.
That there's
this
secret.
These programs are, there's a government program studying this. UFOs,
right.
UAP.
Right. But the official line of all these entities has been the U.S. government doesn't have, a secret program that, for instance, has a lot of material that we think is from other planets or anything like that. Right?
Yes.
There's no...
Correct.
So what you're talking about is, in effect, private information. You have private reasons to think that the U.S. government effort goes beyond just collecting data and videos and trying to resolve anomalies.
I mean, this has been stated by people who are affiliated with the military. So it's not necessarily private information to me or to people who have been watching the news.
My understanding is that there's a...
That's a great answer. You can tell she's so annoyed by him, but she's just hanging in. It's a good question, though. It's like, this is important. It's important that, these questions are asked so that people who are new to all of this can see that they're being asked and they're being answered in a direct, straightforward way. So I'm here for it.
Set of people, including former Defense Department officials, various people who have said, one, consistently, there's a bunch of aerial phenomena that we don't understand, that our pilots see, that we have video of. Some of the video has been released. Some of it, as far as I can tell from my own private conversations, is classified. But that's sort of publicly stated, that there's some things we see in the sky that we don't understand. Then we have also publicly stated that, look, the U.S. government, we research this stuff. We've set up sort of dedicated groups that are researching it. But their public statements are limited to, we're trying to resolve anomalies. We don't know anything about secret programs. And then you have, starting after 2017, a set of whistleblowers or would-be whistleblowers who have come forward, who have testified before Congress, who have written books saying, actually, the U.S. government, people in the U.S. government know more about this than the public statements are letting on. There are secret programs. There are, materials held by defense contractors that people think come from other worlds, these kind of things, right? So I'm just trying to distinguish between those two layers. There's sort of
okay. So I have a
public
question.
Information
then.
is,
I have a question for you. So
yes,
the people who are the whistleblowers, are these not also people who are part of our government and employed by our government?
No, they are.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
So what's the difference then? So we have.
Okay.
I agree,
that's fair.
Yeah. I agree with you. Well, wait. So we have. This is what's confusing, and I think we should be rightly confused here, because I believe that this confusion keeps people from wanting to do the research, because you have the government, right? You have the whistleblowers who are working for the government, and people who have written the books, like Lou Elizondo had been working for the government in one of these programs, says this is still happening. And we also have people like Tim Gallaudet, who's an rear admiral. You have Colonel Carl Nell stating that, there's no doubt that this is happening, that aliens exist, or, that this phenomena exists, and we're studying it. So you have those people coming out, and then you have another part of the government who's coming out and basically denying this. So it's very confusing to a person who wants clarity.
Isn't that the truth? So true. Yeah, that's what a whistleblower is, right? They're coming out from behind the scenes to blow the whistle on these projects that people should know about. And that's the whole point. So, and it is confusing because but it's getting less confusing. I mean, it seems more and more that as higher and higher positioned people like Tim Gallaudet, who is, very relatable, intelligent guy, former head of NOAA, retired rear admiral, if you can't trust somebody like that, if you can't take their word, Carl Nell, there's enough people now stacked up on one side of this thing saying that this is real, the government is working on it, they know about it, they've seen it, that whether any one individual person is spreading a little bit of disinformation in that, the larger narrative is clear that this is a real thing. And they're going to continue to deny it until they can't deny it anymore. Let's go on to the next moment, and then we'll wrap up.
People inside the government who you think have those kind of concrete beliefs, who are like, okay, these are angels or demons, right? If they're Christian, maybe they think they're demons, right? Or these are literal aliens from another planet who we are speaking to. Are there people who get that concrete in the inner circles you're describing?
Okay, so the people that I know are not being that concrete. However, they still experience the hitchhiker effect, and some of them know that if they, utilize the tools of their own religion, whatever that religion is, Anglicanism or Catholicism, that it seems to help the hitchhiker effect. But they also think that there's, a real phenomena that they would like to back engineer and utilize. But
real technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Machines.
Yes, okay. They believe that. I have not seen machines or anything like that. But I have.
You have not seen?
No.
Have you talked to people who claim they have seen machines?
Yes.
Okay. And those people where do those people say they've seen the machines? Well, inside.
I can't say that, but I can say that I've talked to them about the machines, and they have not told me where they've seen the machines.
Okay. So this, all right. So
I don't know if they've seen the machines or not, or if it's an elaborate setup where they're seeing something. So that's why I like to stay away from most of the government information about the topic. And these are people that are working for the government, with the government.
Right. Okay. So I want to pursue a kind of frustrated line of inquiry. Here. Right. So just a few weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal ran a couple of stories, but the first one was the most important one, that was drawing on a different set of government reports, basically, and leaks about the UFO phenomenon that emphasized the degree to which a lot of UFO material is based on deliberate disinformation. That the sort of running claim in the story was that repeatedly and consistently, the U.S. government has welcomed stories about UFOs and mysterious aerial phenomena as a cover for various high-tech national security experiments. And so one example in the story was there's famous cases really, but one famous case of a UFO encounter involving a nuclear facility where nuclear weapons were shut down mysteriously in association with an aerial phenomena. And the claim in the journal story was that the U.S. government was testing the effects of an electromagnetic pulse in fear that the Soviet Union would use this pulse against our facilities. And the pulse created a sort of weird experience for the people in the facility. And the government was happy to have them believe it was aliens rather than come clean about how we were testing our own defenses. So that would be one example, right? And then related to that, the piece also suggests that there's kind of like hazing and initiation rituals inside the military where people will be told, hey, we're studying UFO. No, I can't show it to you. You can never tell anyone about it. Goodbye. And this is like a prank or it's a test and so on, right? That this is part of military culture, right? So that's that story, right? You could take that story and say, okay, this kind of layering of deliberate disinformation, pranks, rumor, and so on helps explain why so many people in the U.S. government believe there are UFOs, real UFOs, right? And then you also have this sort of persistent religious spiritual phenomena that is like other religious and spiritual phenomena. It's not really amenable to study, to scientific study, right? It's amenable to sociological or religious study, right? So why shouldn't I, as a curious journalist or listeners of the show, just sort of take the Wall Street Journal narrative as normative and, say, look, if somebody really had a piece of a spaceship and you have these whistleblowers willing to talk about it, wouldn't someone actually just show us the spaceship, right?
It could be.
That was a very long question, but this is, tell me what you make of anything I've just said.
I mean, the person who wrote the Wall Street Journal article, which of course I read, seems to have a conclusion, and I don't. So there's a conclusion that no, there's nothing to see, right? And I don't think that's true. But the conclusion that there is something to see and it's an alien spacecraft doesn't feel right to me. So I always propose that and also the idea that it's a cover-up for tech absolutely could be true. But then you have to take this into context. We had this program, a government program called Project Blue Book, and it was, run by Alan Hynek. And
this is in the 1950s.
Yeah, all the way up through the 1960s. And so, with this program, there was a disinformation campaign by the government to identify people who were believers and spreading belief and basically stigmatizing them. Right. And so this is something that we still have inherited. We've inherited the Project Blue Book. And then we have the Wall Street Journal article coming out. No, it's just the opposite. The government wanted you to believe in that. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just a very confusing scenario. And I choose not to pay attention to that. There's disinformation about this. I think that's the first thing people need to know, is that you're not going to get the straight story, like I said earlier, from the government. The government is telling us two different contradictory things. the story lies elsewhere, or the answer lies elsewhere.
She's so right. There is, and has been always, a well-funded, strategic, persistent effort to stigmatize people in the community, to stigmatize the community as a whole, to infiltrate different UFO-related groups, to influence what they do and what they say, and to sow and spread misinformation and disinformation all over the place, so that in the presence of all of that misinfo and disinfo, the facts that do exist, that are out there, the truth that is actually out there, is indistinguishable from the nonsense. And so, you know, they pollute the information space in such a way that it doesn't matter who comes forward and says whatever, because, you know, it's half of what you hear is complete bullshit, and, you know, a large percentage of the rest of it is mixed in with bullshit. So how would you know? And I think that's the whole point. Tense interview. Interesting. Great conversation. Ross, you know, he comes around at the end, you'll see, but he is visibly frustrated by the answers that he gets from Diana, but her answers are solid, and she's great. I think she makes an excellent point. This is a weird time to try and find answers. It's always a weird time to try and find answers. Maybe that's the whole point. But the answers we seek lie in another castle. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't be shy. Don't be a stranger. Don't forget to like and share this video. And hey, if you're not already a subscriber, consider subscribing. It only takes a second. It doesn't cost anything. And it's a great way to support our work here at The Night Shift. I'll see you on the next one. Until then, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind.